coolest car. Well, the coolest car I was ever in was what got me into racing, which was a 1966 Ford GT40 that had raced at Le Mans in '66.
That's pretty cool.
In episode 6, We Were on a Break, we cover all the different race series that we immersed ourselves in during this nearly month-long drought to Formula One. Caroline traveled to Nashville, Tennessee to see the U.S. Legend Car Race Series. Christina does a deep dive on IndyCar while they race the Long Beach Grand Prix. And I made the long, arduous 32-minute drive to Sonoma Raceway to see the GT America and GT World Challenge race weekend. The highlight of that being a chance to sit down with the driver of the OnlyFans P1Groupe race team and the president of P1Groupe to teach me a little bit about GT racing, because it's something I clearly didn't know much about.
Yep, that makes sense. Awesome. So, firstly, what kind of racing is this?
Sports car racing, GT cars.
Okay.
In fact, every series that's here this weekend is a GT series from Vanatech World Challenge, which is GT3 cars, literally as the name implies, all over the world. GT America, which is GT3 and GT4 cars running here in the States. And then I think GT4 America is here as well, which is a semi-endurance version of the GT4 series.
Okay. And how long have you been racing this class of car?
This is my first year running in this class. I kicked it off this year in January with 24 hours of Dubai.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long have you been racing in cars in general?
The better part of the last 10 years, working my way up from some of the amateur endurance series to last year doing half a season in Porsche Sprint Challenge, and then this year moving over to GT America and the GT3.
Outstanding. And what did you race like early in your career? What did you start out with?
Started with Lemons, the gateway drug for endurance racing, and then moved up to the American Endurance Racing Series here in North America. Won that national championship in 2021, driving effectively what was an IMSA spec Cayman from about 2016, and then moved up to the 992 Cup car last year, and then the GT3R this year.
Okay. And how long have you guys been around?
Started P1Groupe in 2006. And we basically place drivers all over the world. We manage drivers. We put programs together like this one, and which we essentially sourced from the ground up with, in conjunction with Alex, and built this program around Alex for the season. And we also race or sell racing assets for teams worldwide.
In doing some research, I did notice a lot of the teams that I had reached out to, their websites seem like they manufacture parts. And then is that a secondary thing? Like, oh, I want to get into making race car parts and then eventually making a race team? Or I want to have a race team, I need these parts, so I go ahead and build them and I might as well sell them as well.
A lot of times you'll see a tuner go racing. And we've worked with a number of tuners like Rentec, for example. When they were coming into motorsports, they had been an AMG tuner for decades, and they wanted to go pro racing to push their business, but also promote the parts that they sell. And it also allows their engineers to get a different aspect of the parts that they're building and the application for them. So I would say most of the time you're going to see a tuner go racing more than the opposite direction, because once you get into racing, you realize how all-consuming it is.
Mm-hmm.
You've pretty much got traction control and throttle mapping, start, radio, acknowledge. The drink button is on here, so I'm actually able to stay hydrated while we're driving as well. This is your wipers. This knob controls the menu on the Motec system, which allows me to see what the brake bias is and see what the temps are and the tire pressures and everything else. But honestly, the steering wheel is awesome. But from a car control perspective, the most important piece is the two pedals down there underneath. No clutch in this car. From a pedal perspective, there's a little go pedal right here. So leaving the pits, you just engage the gear and the paddle and hit the long skinny pedal on the right, and you're good to go.
So if someone wanted to follow a similar trajectory in life, like they decide I want to be a race car driver, they see you out here on track, what would be your advice to them on how to get started where to begin becoming a driver for a team like this?
Yeah, so I don't know if lemons is the right thing for everyone to do, but it's certainly accessible and will get you comfortable with wheel-to-wheel racing. But really, whether it's that, going to Skip Barber or one of the racing schools, and then entering one of the low-level AM single-make series, just to try and get some drive time under your belt and understand what it's all about. And then there's a fairly well-worn path now, whether it's AER or World Racing League or Champ Car, and then on up from there, whether you want to do it in a MX-5 or whether you want to do it at the high end at the GT3 class. There's a lot of different ways to get there.
Cool. Now, a lot of our members, we have a couple hundred members in our social club that are sim racers. They do the F1 video game, Ace, Assetto Corsa, Competizone.
You can drive our car in all those games now. It's accessible. The livery's on there.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
It took about a day from when we actually announced the entry in the series for me to realize that on trading paints and all these like add-on services, people had done it instantly.
All right, I'm going to definitely tell them about that. Yeah. But do you spend any time doing any kind of simulator racing, whether it's like a video game, or do you have a custom sim rig that you practice with?
So I do have a sim rig that I practice with. It's not the ones that the factories are using for the F1 drivers, but it's pretty good. And it's less about a competitive, I want to go sim race to do it that way, but it's a really effective tool, especially for tracks you haven't driven before. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. They've actually done a really good job getting the car dynamic down. It's a really helpful tool in advance of pretty much every weekend, but especially when it's a track you haven't spent a lot of time on.
Now, that last part there I thought was really cool, and I went and checked it out online. There's modders who do this all the time, and they even update the cars throughout the year. I'll leave some links in the YouTube description so you or any of the members from our Gravel Trap Endurance League who play ACC can use the skin.
So is this the thing where like the drivers have a OnlyFans account and can connect with the fans more directly?
That is the whole purpose of OnlyFans, is to directly connect with your fan base and to give them a different level of access. So, for example, P1Groupe has an OnlyFans page. We're doing documentaries for what they have launched now with OFTV, which is like their version of YouTube. And so we'll be doing documentaries throughout the course of the year and launching episodes. We have our first one getting ready to launch. So that's the whole premise of it, is really being able to connect with the fans directly.
That's outstanding.
When you guys acquire a car, I mean, do you buy it from a Porsche dealership and modify it, or do you have to buy
These come directly from Porsche, ready to race. So typically you have very little that you're allowed to do to the cars. You can do some setup changes, things like that. You're allowed to do the things that the series requires as far as balance of performance, as far as the car IDs, the position sensors and lights, and obviously all your various different radios and things of that nature. But for the most part, they come from Porsche ready to race.
Do you have any crazy stories in your racing career that you'd be willing to share with us?
The answer is yes, but Eric probably has crazier stories. He definitely has crazier stories. Definitely.
Okay.
Well, I would say the craziest thing that I saw is, and we've raced all over the world, so when the pandemic was popping off in China in November of 2019, we were in Shanghai racing. So it got pretty hairy doing the Asian Le Mans series, and we went from there to Adelaide, Australia, and at that time, not only was the pandemic just really getting off, because this was January of 2020, but it was also just at the tail end of the wildfires in Australia that just decimated that whole area. And when we got there, there was still parts of the area that were smoldering, and one of our teammates actually rescued a koala bear on the side of the road. And it's interesting that the koalas were coming out from the woods that were on fire, and it's 105 degrees there. So they were literally just like this on their paws, just trying to stay off of the pavement, the asphalt, because it was so hot. I mean, their paws were literally burning, on top of the fact that their whole environment was burning. And one of our teammates actually rescued a koala. I think for Alex, the craziest race probably was Dubai. To fly on the other side of the world with a 12 or 14-hour time difference to be on your game. And Alex was surrounded with 3 pro drivers that were really badass. I mean, these guys were just amazing to work with. And
the other thing that was crazy, so Dubai is a fairly exotic location. You're on the other side of the world. I think the most remarkable part about that, or one of the things that has kind of burned into my brain about it, was Dubai is kind of the first race of the season internationally. So a lot of people are like, yeah, we're going to go do that. I remember rolling out and being like, that BMW behind me, Valentino Rossi is driving that BMW.
The motorcycle guy.
Yeah, like the 8-time world champion motorcycle guy, in a very mean-looking fluorescent green and black with his number on it. BMW.
With his big new grills.
Yep.
Like
And the GT3 BMW is a pretty mean-looking car. And being out there with those guys, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, super interesting.
Is there anything like exciting coming up for P1 Group that I may not have found online that you want to share with everybody?
I would say the next big thing for us that's going to happen beyond what we're doing is launching our merchandise line with OnlyFans Racing. So that's going to be hitting soon, and we want to hit it hot and heavy.
Huge thank you to Eric and Alex for sitting down with us and teaching us all about GT racing. It was a blast. My apologies to the MRS mechanic who I kept getting in the way of in the garage there. Thank you for your patience. And huge shout out to OnlyFans. You guys have an amazing race team, and we'll be keeping an eye on them throughout the year. If you're ever looking for a podcast to sponsor, Eric's got my number. For our listeners, if you get a chance to go to a GT America, GT World Challenge event, check it out. There is so much to do there. The entire thing is an event, and the access is unlike what you would get at, say, an F1 race, for instance. You can walk right up to the garages. Oftentimes, the mechanics in the garages will invite you in, show you what the car is all about. It's a great time. They got sim racing booths, other activities and whatnot that fill out the whole weekend. So, look up your nearest racetrack and get in the car.